ingredients in descending order of weight, and additives are, of course, ingredients. Contaminants are not, because they are not added intentionally to the food, but additives are. How do you have to label them? Article 18.2 says that food additives and food enzymes belonging to one of the categories in Annex 7, Part C of the regulation must be designated by the name of that category, preservative, emulsifier, coloring agent, and the like, followed by the specific name of the additive or the E number. So the producer can choose whether he wants to put the complete name of the additive or he wants to use the E number, but he must always have the name of the category before. If an additive or an enzyme belongs to more than one of the categories, some would be at the same time a preservative and an antioxidant, for instance, it's the category appropriate to the principal function which has to be indicated. This, by the way, is the most important change vis-à-vis the previous legislation, the one currently into force. This list is also different, but basically it's a matter of presentation. So you see here you have all the categories, and I will give you an example with an emulsifier, how you put it in the ingredient list. So here the producer has chosen to put the category, of course, emulsifier, then followed by the name of the additive, in this case mono and diglycerate of fatty acids. And here you have another example where the producer has chosen to do the other alternative, name of the category, it's still an emulsifier, followed by the E number, in this case, E472E, and there's also E471. That's, I've just explained. There's a provision that if the additive, actually it says if a material, it can be something else than an additive, but it applies to additives, of course. If an additive is present in the form of a nanomaterial, its name must be followed by the indication nano between brackets. And finally, there is an important derogation to the principle that you have always to label the additive. If a food additive or a food additive or food enzyme does not have to be labeled, if they are used as processing aids, you know what processing aids are. This is material which is used intentionally in the process, in the production of the food, but which is not present even if as a residue in the final product. In other terms, it has disappeared in the process. It's not present in the final product. A solvent, for instance, often would disappear in the process. And there's another case, a very important one. If an additive has been used not in the final food itself, but if one of the ingredients for the final food, and it does not serve a technological function in the finished product, then it does not have to be labeled, although it is present. Example, you have tuna with mayonnaise. You have used an emulsifier probably to do your mayonnaise, otherwise it would be difficult. It could be the egg, admittedly. And it doesn't serve a purpose in the final product. So in this case, it doesn't have to be labeled. But my egg example is a bad one because there is another rule in the regulation which says that allergic material always have to be labeled irrespective of any other rule. So the carryover principle that you don't label an additive in an ingredient if it doesn't serve a technological function in the food, this is overruled by the principle that you always label an ingredient which is on the list of allergenic, which is Annex 3 to the regulation. And we had an example, I think, yeah, this one. This one, you see, it was a carryover because wholemeal bread, in this case, is an ingredient in the final product. And the emulsifier is indicated. It is either because it has a technological function, or maybe that the producer has decided to put it anyway. Because, of course, producers can always label more than they are required to do, as long as it is correct, of course. So I don't know in this case if it had a function in the carryover, or whether the producer was just being transparent and labeling everything. Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick. So now we have around 20 minutes for the question and answer session. Since that we have some question already for the food additives, so I think 20 minutes should be okay. So the question can be either food additives or contaminants or any general EU food safety regulation. So please, question. I got some written questions, so I will read it first. So the first question is that for the fully cooked chicken product, which have animal products such as milk or egg as its ingredients, do these ingredients like egg or milk need to come or purchased from EU approved plants or approved industry? I mean the egg or milk that have put into the chicken product. Do the milk or egg have to come from the approved plants?
Right. This is not a question about food additives, feed additives, or labeling. It's a very difficult question. We actually had a workshop last week here in Bangkok to explain the rules. I attended, and I've forgotten everything. It's so complicated. I think that in the case of milk, it has to come. It would depend on the proportions and the like. And this is an easy question because you also have the question, do I need a health certificate for the milk and the eggs? Because they are products of animal origin, you need a health certificate and so on. So I'd rather not start a discussion on the. I believe that the answer would be that in this case, the milk would have to come from an EU authorized milk production establishment. I believe the eggs has to come from an approved establishment, not necessarily one in the EU. But, I mean, check, there is a regulation, it's called the Regulation on Composite Products, 2012. And if you really have a serious problem, you can always send the question to us in writing, either directly to me or to Kunduzit, he's no longer there, and then we will answer in writing. But probably the best thing we could do is put the presentation on the website, because we had a sort of almost 1 hour presentation on these questions last week, and we will put it on the website so you can already see the most obvious examples. It's an extremely complex problem, and this morning indicated that we need to clarify that and make these rules much more simpler because they're unnecessarily complicated for everybody. Sorry, I cannot answer better now.
Thank you. So the written question, are there any person like to ask the question? Because the written question is quite a specific question, but okay, this one is on nutrition labeling. First is that, are there any like a variation of the nutrient? I mean the nutrition labeling put on the label, like what is the variation, how many percentage allow, like a plus and minus, or do they need to be like a very exact? And this one is the first one, and the second is that like one company, normally for one product they have only one label, but when they export to different different customer may require different salt content, like 1% or 1.5%. Do they need to have different label for different customer?
On the nutritional value, there is a complete annex in the regulation on calculation of the nutrients, the content in nutrients. Again, this is extremely complicated. It says further that the Commission will produce a number of additional guidance on the calculation of the nutrition value. On the second one, it's actually the responsibility of the one who's putting it on the market in the EU to make sure that the label is correct. In other terms, this is a legislation which protects the final consumer, and the obligation to label according to the regulation is controlled at the time of placing on the market. So if you send different products to the EU, and it is true that there are parts of the EU where it is customary to put less salt than in others, it depends on the label is to be correct at the time of placing on the market. So, and you cannot put between 1.5 and 2% of salt. This is actually a big difference. So the control is made at the time of placing on the market, and it's the responsibility of the one who places on the market, the retailer or the importer, to make sure that, so you don't necessarily have to worry yourself as an exporter. It is the importer in the EU or even the retailer who is responsible for the labeling. Labeling has to be accurate at the time of physically placing on the market in the EU.
Okay, so I try to select the question that quite general and not too specific. This one is, they ask about the food contact materials. So are there any regulation on the additives for food contact materials? Are there any?
On the food contact materials, yes. Specifically on that part, we have one. Food additives on food contact materials, these are two different entries, two different regulations.
Additives in the food contact material?
Yes, there is, but for plastic materials, for polymers, there's specific regulation on the additives used in the production of plastic materials, not the others. To the best of my knowledge, not other types of food contact materials.
Okay. One question asks about the case of the GM papaya. So on the case of GM papaya, there's some shipment of the processed fruits from Thailand is found to contain the GM papaya. What is the control or monitoring measure taken by the EU?
Well, we have detected in a number of samples now in Europe over the last 2-3 months presence of genetically modified materials in papaya from Thailand in the rapid alert system. So we have alerted the Thai authorities. We have been discussing with them. Of course, this is, when you detect GM, there's always two issues. Is it an authorized GM in the EU? And then the question is, does it have to be labeled? And if it's a non-authorized GM, then the problem is it shouldn't be there at all. In this case, GM papaya is not authorized in the EU. It's not authorized in Thailand either, by the way. So this is illegal on the Thai market as well. And of course, what we want is that we should no longer detect these. I must say that the numbers of samples where we detect has been reduced considerably. So it looks like something has been done which is always a good thing when you see that the authorities are taking corrective measures. It's always something we appreciate. And we will see over the coming weeks and months if the problem is completely eliminated or not. I'm worried that it may not be completely eliminated because these trees have been growing over the years. So, and as I said, they shouldn't be present in Thailand. So it is illegal seeds being used. There is a colleague here from DOA. I don't know if she wants to comment. No.
Okay. So next question is on the food additives. So as the concept of the maximum level of food additives is the maximum use level. Is the level that the industry use when they process the food. But when they conduct the enforcement is the residue or the occurrence of the food additive that contained in the food. So if there are some belief that the industry uses over the maximum use level, but the content in the food is just below the maximum level, are there any measure or anything to do on this case?
Well, the idea about the food additives is that they're used according to their technological need. So you shouldn't be using more than you need to preserve the food so long, to color the food or to emulsify it or something like that. So first of all, additives are often also not inexpensive. So why would somebody use more than necessary? That's one question. Often that is the case because you don't want to use it for that technological purpose that you have identified on the label, but you use it for something else. You want to achieve a side effect rather, and that's why you have to use more. Otherwise, it would be economically completely nonsense to do that. So that means that you're probably not using it properly if you have something else. So if we have EU producer, what normally would be happening there? If it's in the same member state, you probably would send out the control authorities and find out what's going on in that company. If it's not the same member state, you probably get some sort of alert report internally, and then the colleagues from the other member states have to find out what's going on, and it has to be discussed. If it's from a third country, a similar exercise will be started, if it's really a problem. I mean, that you sometimes have difficulties to put in the same amount in the production line, that happens. So somebody will go in there and say, from the inspection service, your quality assurance has a problem, they're not keeping the level. So that's where this comes from. So you have to, the first attempt in Europe at least, we would always try to find out why this happens. If it's something related to fraud in the end, that somebody wants to achieve with adding the additive something that is not intended to be, then they risk to have some regulation on the on a specific product, that it's either be taken on the market, the labeling has to be changed, or something has to be done to make it correct again. And similar, I mean, our approach to third countries and internally with the other member states is trying to have the trade partners do the same thing that you would do at home. That's what we could call equivalency. So if you would find something like that from Thailand, I would estimate that we would contact the delegation, have Patrick take care of it, and discuss that with you, or ask to the people in the Thai embassy. So that would be normally the approach. Yeah.
So maybe the last 5 or 10 minutes to last question. One is specific question like for the food product, I mean the outer box, if there are no producer name in the front of the outer box, but I think it should be appear on the inside the inside package. Is it okay for this case?
Well, it depends on what you're talking about. If it's an outer box which contains individual chocolates or whatever, and the outer box goes on the market, the outer box has to be labeled. And the only derogation is that each individual chocolate inside the box, because the space is too small, can contain only some of the essential information. If the outer box is just for the purpose of shipping or something like that, then you are no longer in food labeling. You are under the specific rules of customs and the like, health certificate perhaps, and normally packaging has to be labeled, but this is no longer labeled for the purpose of informing the consumer. This is labeled for the purpose of trade and the like. There are quotas, there are taxes and all the rest, and you have to look into these different legislation. So the regulation on labeling is labeling to protect the final consumer. It's about everything that goes on the market to the consumer. The rest is business relation and the like. They are legislation, but they are scattered. I mean, if you ship from Thailand, first it's Thai legislation which is applicable to your shipping, and then if you and so on. But the regulation 1169 and the current directive regulate information to the final consumer, and before we don't even check respect to this regulation, because sometimes it's labeled at the last minute. I mean, like I see often in Thailand, there is a sticker with information in Thai, which is glued over the information from the US or something like that. But it's at the time of placing it on the market, which the sticker must be there, and it's the same in the EU.
Okay, so I come to the last question, and the last question can be also the conclusion of the today's seminar too, because they ask, what is in your opinion, your recommendation that the Thai food industry should do to comply with the EU regulation, maybe specifically on food additives, contaminants, and labeling?
Innocence of law is no defense. It's a legal statement for that. So, I mean, you have to be informed. That's why we do this exercise here today. That's why Patrick is here. That's why your people are in Brussels, so that you have a contact. So I can only advise you, before you spend thousands of tie butts on rolls of labels. Get yourself informed. Ask what can be what are the requirements. There are also private consultants which may be helping you in these terms. Get in contact with your importer before you pack the stuff. That's the most important thing, I would say, to save money. Ask the importer what are the requirements, what can be in there. As the lady said, send a sample so that they know what they're expecting. If you think there's something wrong with it, tell them. Say, maybe I put too much of this and that in there I'm not sure whether it's enough, or I have big tolerances in my content. You know, you have a weak quality assurance, or you have different suppliers who have different quality, and then you get this kind of waves in your product that sometimes your product is okay, sometimes it's not okay. Discuss that with the importer in Europe. That's the most important thing to avoid this kind of problems. They know normally the requirements. They know where the problems are with your products. Also, in different member states, as Europe is a patchwork. So many member states have control hobby horses. The Scandinavians put a lot of money in controlling food colorings because they don't like them too much. Other member states are more into pesticide residues. They put all their control money in this pot. So be informed about this. What is your market? What are the consumers about? So that you don't waste money on exercises that are either not necessary or that are wrong, and will delay also the time that your product ends up on the market. And even worse, you never want to be on a rapid alert. That is not the right way to find out what the EU legislation is.
Yes, just my own two bad ideas. If you see the rapid alerts, or if you see the report from our inspectors, the biggest reason for interception is basic hygiene rules. And it's very rarely that you are just at the margin of a contaminant or something like that. It very often it's sort of missing the margin by a large way. So the key thing is to produce products of good quality and good hygiene. I mean, and Thailand is not doing that bad, because I understand that 2013 Thailand is in the lead for the moment on export to the EU of products of animal origin, shrimps, chicken, feed, and other fisheries products. So you're not doing that bad. Continue doing a good job. And you're doing a good job by attending the seminars so massively. I mean, this is quite a success, I believe. To have so many people until 5 o'clock to listen to these awful presentations like the two from my colleagues. I didn't understand much. So I believe you are doing a good job. Continue doing that.
Thank you very much. Yes, I'm sure that the Thai industry will continue to do the good job. So I don't think I need to make any summary, because two of you already put the conclusion of today's seminar. So I think now we come to the end of today. Anyway, the three speakers will be with you also tomorrow with the issue on the feed safety. But I'm not. I will not be with you tomorrow. So let's make the big hand to the three speakers from EU that make a very good job today.
Thank you very much once again for all three guest speakers for the information.